A side effect of clomipramine, an antidepressant drug, is to induce orgasms when yawning.
This is Exploring Unusual Sex, the podcast about odd stuff that helps understanding everyday matters. Our host today, from Milan, Italy, is author, journalist and personal coach Ayzad.
Welcome. In this episode we talk about embarrassing toupees, conversation-killing practices, foo-foos and peepees, governors in garterbelts, and much more. Let's get started, and the first topic is the Weimar Republic. We have reached episode number 10, and if you are still listening, you obviously must be attracted to an idea of sex more creative and free than the one that surrounds us every day. Maybe you asked yourself what the world would be like if suddenly all the useless inhibitions, moralisms, prejudices disappeared along with whatever complicates it so much what should be the most natural activity there is. Well, you can't stop asking, because we know the precise answer. You just have to study history, especially the parts that are normally not taught in school. I did just that, also with an interesting book by Mel Gordon titled Voluptuous Panic, which is a meticulously researched analysis of erotic life during the Republic of Weimar, that is, Germany between 1920 and 1933. In case you were distracted in class, here is a bit of context. The First World War ended badly. The government is in a state of permanent chaos, the rest of the world presented a horrifying bill, and the nation has such a ravaged economy that one simple loaf of bread costs 2,000 billion marks. Banknotes are so worthless that people use them by the barrel in place of firewood. Lots of people survive only by bartering, but the war created many widows and female orphans who have nothing to bother with except their own bodies. So Berlin becomes the world capital of prostitution, attracting relatively rich foreigners from every country. The opportunity to earn real money seduces more and more persons, including men and minors, into selling themselves to the highest bidder. This attracts more clients for whom new adult clubs are created catering to any preference. This allows gay people, who until then had been treated like criminals or lunatics, to massively come out and move to Berlin. This attracts even more customers and gives origin to really specialized clubs, so much so that at some point there are no less than 85 of them just for lesbians. A full-fledged gender-bending culture is born, celebrated by an entirely new entertainment style, cabaret, featuring innovative and outrageous artists encouraged by the absence of any form of censorship. Human history never saw such freedom before, and Berlin becomes an open-air laboratory also for the newfangled science of sexology, launching magazines, associations, and serious studies on uncommon sexualities. This allows the creation of the Sexology Institute of Magnus Hirschfeld and its Museum of Paraphilias. This attracts more punters, sex tourists, and outcasts, feeding a whirlwind of erotic exploration open to excesses as revolutionary as they are potentially unhealthy.
Let me interrupt you just a sec for an important reminder. The episode notes contain all the links to the topics mentioned in the podcast, and if you want to dig deeper, you will find hundreds of further articles on the Ayzad.com website.
So, a totally uninhibited society is like that. A volcano bursting with creativity and energy that just in a few years can spew stuff like the Bauhaus School, the paintings of Otto Dix and Max Ernst, the expressionist cinema of Fritz Lang and Ernst Lubitsch, the dodecaphonic music of Schoenberg, the theater of Brecht, the performances of Anita Berber and Marlene Dietrich. Yet, at the same time, it is also an ideal hunting ground for conmen, sex criminals, drug dealers, occultists, and deranged Satanists. Anarchy is a fascinating utopia, but the real-world test proved it an unfeasible trap, where few predators got rich on the misery of idealists, delusionals, and desperate people whose life had lost all value. Also, excesses always cause reactions that it is equally helpful to know, at least to avoid them when they reappear in the distance. In that case, they took several different forms, including the unforeseeable one of the Freikorperkultur naturist movement, aspiring to a return to an elusive, pure lifestyle through nudity and physical exercise, but which ended up imploding on inner power struggles. And then, of course, the pseudo-morals of the Nazi Party arrived, with the promise of making Germany great again. And we all know how it ended. When we talk about burning books, few remember that their first violent act was indeed assaulting Hirschfeld Institute, destroying its priceless research materials and burning its library, containing the largest collection on atypical sex ever assembled. Before the war descended into the bloodiest massacre of all times, the Weimar Republic allowed us a glimpse on a way of interpreting sexuality so different that I would call it unbelievable myself if I hadn't seen its historical photos. The lesson I took home is yet another confirmation that when it comes to sex, the most important element is not what you do or with whom, also because exploration often opens up new and unexpected directions, but the real point is to act consciously, letting the instinct run free, but only within very well-defined boundaries of safety, legality, and good sense. We are not born to live like brutes, he said, and the final act of the Land of Eroticism is the brightest proof there can be.
The Sexual Explorers Manifesto is a global initiative to spread a healthier and more positive approach to sexuality. You can easily find it with an online search, but in the meantime, let's take a closer look at one of its 15 items. Today's one says:
Sex must be talked about with an appropriate language. Restoring dignity to sex also involves talking about it with using correct terms. Stop using baby talk, euphemisms, stuffy paraphrases, and linguistic artifices then, for they wrongly suggest there is something to hide, and they only create confusion. Using avoidable jargon, for example, here, pause, GW, similarly and needlessly complicates communication with people who don't know it, aren't required to, and much less to adopt it.
This is your moment. In every episode, we pick one question among those sent to our expert at podcast@ayzad.com. So let's get writing to get an answer like this.
This time, Exploring Unusual Sex answers Oleg, who wrote, "Don't tell anybody, but I am rehashing everything I am learning from your podcast and articles to pose as a sex guru among my group of friends. Now we are all competing in discovering the weirdest practices ever, so can you suggest the ultimate quote to kill them?" Well, I am not totally sure this is the purpose of my hard work, but I can suggest even two. The first is kokigami, which is supposed to be the ancient art of cutting, painting and gluing paper sheets to create something similar to penis puppets. Dragons, birds, samurai and demon masks, more or less the fake Zen version of those awful elephant underwear. Fact is, however, this is all but a prank devised in New Zealand in the 90s to make fun of origami, so you can first give out the papercraft books they sell online to your friends as presents, and then vituperate them for their gullibleness. The second item is chula kwikudushka, an erotic technique similar to Indian Tantra, invented by all-American boy Harley Regan in the late 70s. The outlandish name, that originally was just kwadushka, derives from the publicity stunt of trying to pass these breathing exercises as an ancient Cherokee art. When Native Americans denounced it and threatened to sue for cultural contempt, changing one letter and adding the first word from the Mayan dictionary made it all even more exotic and new agey. Anyway, according to those who tried it, it works. After solving this doubt too, I want to remind everyone that sex should always be a pleasure, not a problem, even when it is uncommon. However, if you are experiencing issues, I can help you as a personal coach to discover together the ideal strategy to win back your happiness in this field. You can get in touch through my website ayzad.com, spelled AYZAD, and saying you are a listener of this podcast will earn you a 20% discount on the first session.
This episode is almost over. But we still have time to read one entry from XXX, the Dictionary of Unusual Sex, available in online bookstores everywhere, but in Italian only for the moment.
Today's entry is merkin. This is a quaint English word to indicate a pubic toupee. It is a triangle of real or synthetic fur to be applied with makeup glue over the genitals, especially of females. In the 16th century, these objects had the purpose of making the prostitutes who had to shave to get rid of lice or who had to hide syphilis marks look normal. In our day and age, they are used instead in the show business to make actresses wearing flesh-colored panties look nude, as a workaround for prohibitions and censorships. At the turn of the millennium, someone even created artistic versions in color, zebra-striped, metallic, and so on, as an answer to the ever more common pubic shaving, to no success to speak of. And that really was it. Before leaving you with one last unusual sex fact, I want to thank you for listening and invite you to follow me on my social networks and above all on my website, Ayzad.com, which is also the ideal place to sign up for my newsletter. That way you'll get straight in your inbox new articles, reviews, invitations to events, and the notification for new podcast episodes which you can listen to and comment pretty much everywhere, like iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Spreaker, and so on. If you liked exploring unusual sex, I would also like to invite you to fill the Tell Me About You form you can find linked in the episode notes, so you will help me make the next episodes even better and closer to your tastes. Finally, you can also lend a hand by telling your friends about this podcast and writing about it on your social networks. Thanks, and before moving on to the next episode, here's the fact I promised you. Transvestism was socially acceptable in 18th century America, so much so that Lord Cumberry, governor of New York, opened the 1702 assembly dressed in a ball gown.